Hello and welcome back to another episode of PS4 Horror Spotlight. This week we're looking at Until Dawn. I have to admit, I was looking forward to shredding this one. A point-and-click adventure aspiring to be a David Cage game, as dumb as Beyond Two Souls, and with more plot holes than Heavy Rain. It sounds almost too easy. The best part is that David Cage games are highly playable. What makes them bad is not their mechanics, but rather the stupidity of the storytelling, the laughably contrived characters, the thinly veiled illusion of choice, usually affecting nothing more than which characters die and are therefore absent from the hilarious final act, and finally, the sheer sincerity and earnestness with which the entire mess is conveyed. It's like watching a circus clown spinning an absurd number of plates only to fumble and have them crash down around him spectacularly, tearing him limb from limb until nothing is left but a pile of red pudding. So when I first heard that Until Dawn was designed like a David Cage game, and proposed as if that's something to be proud of, mind you, but set to a 1980s slasher horror story, I was instantly sold on the idea. But then I realized that one of the best aspects of 1980s slasher flicks is their tendency towards shoestring budgets, and Until Dawn was funneled just enough production dollars to end world hunger for the next decade. This is the sort of genre that would be perfectly befitting of an FMV game on Sega CD, but with the implementation of modern sensibilities, such as being fooled into thinking that David Cage games are well written. Instead, the creative team at Supermassive Games threw the kitchen sink in Until Dawn, making it much bigger in scope than it had any right to be, thus ruining the potential for a small-time slasher throwback that so many of us were drooling over. The terrible writing is there, and Supermassive actually tries to pass off its slasher-themed setting as a crutch, but with a game that feels like more money than 1,000 of me will ever lay hands on, and a story that strives for complexity and succeeds only slightly more than the average David Cage game, either the writing needed to be better or the production values needed to be worse. Perhaps the biggest folly of all was the cast of characters and its dissonance with the intended goals of Supermassive's audience. You're supposed to try and save as many characters as possible, but the entire cast consists of teenagers written as if by a team of Fox News anchors, and the dialogue comes off 90% cringy. I actually had to fight with my own id not to kill these idiots at the first given opportunity, and I generally play video games to please my id. Or at least that's what I thought when I first played Until Dawn, and it was that mindset I had going in for a second time for this review. But then something happened. There was a moment early on where the game took a different direction by killing off a character that had survived the whole way in my first playthrough, and I found myself reasonably impressed. Then several more things happened that were different from the first time around. The character that had died early the first time was now having an otherwise missed interaction and given a new host of choices, and a character that broke off from the group the first time was now a factor in the main plot. At first, I was simply impressed, but before long I was actually having fun. As much as I thought the characters were trashy and terribly written, I was invested in keeping them alive just to see how much stuff I could do with them. They even managed to make the succession of QuickTime events fun by raising the stakes. Just missing a single QTE with one character wound up getting another character killed, because I had stumbled and was too slow on my rescue mission. I'll be damned, interesting mechanics have suppressed my urge to murder these insufferable teenagers with impunity. Said mechanics, however, don't make themselves apparent on the first playthrough, so I recommend playing through the game at least twice to get a sense of how much you can change things. Perhaps a third playthrough will reveal that the choices I've made are simply binary, but that would be a surprise given the depth of changes that took place and the seeming spiderweb of possibilities that could arise from those changes. But then comes the big question. Can I recommend a game that only truly impresses on the second playthrough? The game is only about 8 hours long, so I would say it takes about 9 to get really interesting. And that's a hard sell no matter how you look at it. I can think of one demographic group that's likely to fall in love with Until Dawn, and that group consists entirely of the average David Cage fan. To you all, I don't mean to spew hate about someone whose work you admire, but there are companies that do point-and-click adventure games much better than Quantic Dream, most notably Telltale Games and Double Fine, and pretty much anything from LucasArts if you're willing to go back that far. If you need your point-and-click adventures cinematic and big budget and doing everything they can to hide the fact that they're just point-and-click adventures, You can add supermassive games to that list as well. Notice that I haven't talked about how the average horror fan will like Until Dawn. Well, that's because it's not scary. It's startling at times, but weasels jumping out of cupboards to the tune of a screeching orchestra is not scary. I'm not saying those kinds of scares can't work, but when the cat jumped out of the locker in Alien, at least then the loose cat became relevant to the plot. A random weasel jumping out of a cupboard, or a friend randomly sneaking up on you, or whatever ha, it's harmless after all jump scare the horror medium throws at its audience only serves to lessen the effect of the overall atmosphere. And Until Dawn hands out cheap jump scares like Jehovah's Witnesses hand out pamphlets. You become numb to whatever creepy atmosphere Supermassive Games is trying to establish. The excuse that they're doing it to parody typical slasher movies is often given by apologetic reviewers, but that excuse just doesn't work. It's not a parody if you're just doing the very thing you're insulting. It just means you're self-aware of being shitty, and that's no excuse for actually being shitty. I can't possibly finish this review without mentioning how much the facial motion capture backfired on this game. Supermassive spent exorbitant sums of money hiring B-list actors and using their likenesses with the latest and greatest technology and royally fucked it up. Just look at these facial animations. If you stand still for a moment, the camera zooms in on their faces to show you these abominations. The start menu and pause screen show their faces wincing and smiling and looking like they're holding in the mother of all farts. They're so proud of their shitty work, it's actually adorable. Why does everyone have horse teeth? Why do these characters look so laughably stupid even though Team Bondi perfected facial animations a generation ago in LA Noire? So, Until Dawn has horrible writing, annoying characters, hilariously terrible facial animations, and is totally inept at being a horror game. But it has interesting mechanics and uses them to far greater effect than any David Cage game ever has, and I had a surprisingly good time with it. It's only $20 on the PlayStation Store right now, and at that price, I'd call it money well spent. If you were to suggest I buy Until Dawn at its original retail price of $60, I'd laugh you out of the goddamn neighborhood. But at its current price, yeah, it's a good time. The problem is, I'm supposed to recommend it as a horror game, and to that end, I just can't. If Amnesia is Hellraiser, Silent Hill 2 is Jacob's Ladder, Slender the Arrival is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and PT is Ringu, then Until Dawn is unfortunately I Know What You Did Last Summer. This has been the Panic Reroll with another episode of PS4 Horror Spotlight, a series dedicated to console devotees wondering whether or not a given horror game is worth the asking price. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.